Welcome to episode 64 of the RXP podcast, where three working professionals talk about the games, movies, and TV shows they love to enjoy in their free time. I'm your host for today's episode, Alex, and joining me, as always, are my co-hosts, Tiffany.
Yo, yo, yo!
And Matt.
Yo, yo, yo.
Yo, yo, ma. And so for today's episode, we're going to be talking about RPGs, role-playing games, right? There's a lot of different types of role-playing games out there, generally divided into what you may call, Western RPGs and Japanese RPGs, but definitely there's a lot of subgenres there. There's a lot of different styles, and also there's a lot of different things you do in these RPGs. And so before we get to that, though, as we like to do here on RXP, we're going to start off with a variety game segment, to warm up my co-hosts here into getting into warm up the neurons, getting them firing, thinking about RPGs. And so for today's variety game segment, I've come up with the game of what is the level cap? And so for my co-hosts I'm going to be I have 5 games I've compiled, and for the game I'm going to be asking my co-hosts what is the level cap for the characters in the game. And so what I want both of you to do after I say the name of the game or game series in some cases, I want you at the same time, so I'll count it down, to guess what level you think is the maximum level for characters are in that game. And so whoever's ever closer will get the point, and if you both guess the same thing, you'll both get a point. And yeah, we'll go with that. And whoever has the most points at the end wins. And if you both tie at the end, I don't have a tiebreaker, so you'll just both earn a point. And we'll recap our running total. You literally just want us to blurt it out simultaneously. Yes. So I don't want to do any sort of writing down or anything. It'll be easier for me to keep track. So both of you say it at the same time, and then we'll clarify if I need one of you to repeat it. Okay. All right. Understand? So who's ever closer to the actual maximum level gets it right. So max level.
Is it Price is Right?
No. It's just who's ever closer. Doesn't matter if you go over or under.
There's only 2 gaming franchises that I know the answer to this question.
I think
maybe they'll both be on there.
I think there's more. I think you might have a good inkling too, because there's kind of a meta here a little bit, so to speak. If you can figure it out as we go along. We can proceed. So we'll start off a game we've all played, and I know this for a fact. Or even a game series, rather. Game franchise. Pokemon. Ooh. What is the max level in Pokemon? In 3... Oh, are both of you ready?
Oh, go. Yeah, we're ready.
Mm-hmm.
All right, in 3, 2, 1.
100.
100.
All right. To me, those were at different times, but I would assume it's just lane C. You both get a point. It's 100. Max level for Pokemon is 100.
Nice.
It's been like that since the beginning of the game. Generation, I guess 1 or 0. I guess they call it Gen 1 with red, blue. And so, yeah, both of you get a point. See? Easy,
okay,
right?
To be fair, Matt said the answer right when you said 1, and I was waiting for you to finish saying 1, but I don't know if it is my latency.
I think it was latency because I said 1 and then Matt said it, and then you said it.
Just to me, literally Matt and you said 1 in a 100, and I was like, whoa, I didn't go yet.
Okay, I think that was latency because on my end, I clearly said 1 and then Matt said 100 after me, so he did not anticipate it.
Okay, when you say 2, I might just say it for me.
Okay.
Like when I hear you say 2, I'll say it.
I hope it stays consistent.
All right. I'll leave this in, but I'll hold up a hand when you guys should say it. So I'll count it down and I'll just hold up my hand.
Okay.
No, because it's still latency. Like if I can't hear you,
but there's multiple ways. Who knows? All right, moving on to number 2. Final Fantasy VII Remake. What's the max level for a character in Final Fantasy VII Remake in particular? So the one that came out in 2020. In 3, 2, 1.
50.
You're definitely going at 2, weren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, go at 1. Go at 1.
God. No.
Yeah, it seems like there might be some lanes to here, but you both get a point. It is 50. You know, for some reason, or not for some reason, but obviously it's only part of 7's story that we go through and remake. So I guess it doesn't make sense to go all the way to level 100. But yeah, max level is 50. Great. See, the games you guys have played.
Yeah.
And we're going to keep the train rolling with one more
Okay.
game you guys have both played. And that is The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild.
Oh.
What?
That neither of us have.
incarnation-
100% neither of us got to the level.
I don't
cap.
have levels. We don't have
So-
levels.
At the end of the countdown, say your answer. In 3, 2, 1.
1.
40.
So Tiffany said 1 and Matt said 40. And I'm going to go
even-
with Tiffany as the correct answer because there is no level cap in Breath of the Wild.
Oh my
Link
gosh.
does not level up in the game, so I'll take 1 as closer to there being 0 or NA because there are no levels in that game.
I kind of
Okay.
hate that, but okay.
Matt, I literally was like, why is he asking this question? We don't level
I know.
up.
Well, then
So
I was
you-
like, there must be something like in the DLC or something. I was like, okay, well, there must be a level cap if he's asking.
That fell for it. The
okay.
self-proclaimed Majora's Mask fan over here.
Yeah, but that's not Breath of the Wild.
Fair enough. But that I was
Still
trying
don't
to-
care for Breath of the Wild as much as everybody
This was the
else.
trick for you guys. But yeah, great stuff. You know, Tiffany had the inkling there,
Debatable, but okay.
so she's up 3-2.
I wish my sword leveled up so it wouldn't break. You know what I mean? My goblin spear or whatever.
Yeah, someone tweeted out there like, you know, it would make Elden Ring so much better if my sword would break halfway through the battle. Wouldn't that be great?
All right, fourth game. Maybe Matt can make a comeback here. Maybe not, because I think these last two are the de facto hardest. So it's, remember, who's ever closer gets the point. All right, so for the fourth game, the Disgaea series excluding Disgaea 6. So Disgaea 6 does have a different maximum level cap, so I'm excluding it. So, but this is for the rest of the Disgaea 1 through 5. Strategy RPG. And in 3, 2, 1.
60.
999.
Oh, and Tiffany takes it. And I guess she'll earn the point
Wow.
for this game as a whole. The max level in Disgaea, excluding 6, is 9,999.
I was
Wow.
off by 9,000.
Interesting.
And fun fact for Disgaea 6, they raised the level cap to 99,999,999.
I guess I don't know if that I did play Disgaea for like a hot second. So, and I knew how
I'm not even sure what
ridiculous.
Disgaea is, to be honest.
It's a tactics game.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe
And
it'll come
it's
up in the
anime.
podcast later.
Anime style
maybe.
tactics game. Yeah.
Oh.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. I
So
can
with
see
that,
going over my head.
Tiffany takes it 4-2. But we'll just do the last one for fun because it's also one of my favorite games, so I have to mention it. Tales of Berseria.
Dude, literally I thought you were going to ask about Kingdom Hearts this entire time. And I was like, I know Kingdom Hearts and I know Final Fantasy VII Remake. Like those were the two franchises. I
Oh,
was
you
talking
didn't know
about.
Pokemon? You knew Pokemon.
I mean, I didn't put that into consideration, to be honest. When you were talking about level, I was thinking about the character, not your
Pokemon
mom's.
characters.
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, you said Tales of Berseria.
Yeah, Tales of Berseria. You know, action RPG franchise, Berseria, my favorite in the Tales series. What's the
Okay.
max level for characters in that game? Closest gets it in 3, 2, 1.
69.
99?
And so, you know, Matt over here is just a meme and he doesn't care about the points because he know he's lost. but that's incorrect. Tiffany gets it with the closer guess of 99. The max level is actually 200 in Tales
Nice.
of Berseria.
Oh,
I was
that's weird.
close.
But not close enough. And so with that, that's a wrap for this variety game segment. That's bringing the running total to Tiffany and Matt both tied for second with 2 points, and me still in the lead with 4 points.
Oh my god.
Nice.
And so
At least I'm tied up now.
yeah. And more chances in the future. I know some of our recent episodes we haven't had any variety game segments, but I'm sure they'll come back in some way, shape, or form as they always do. So now, moving on to the topic at hand, RPGs. Guys, what are your favorite RPGs? And I know RPGs have a lot of different definitions for a lot of different people. There's a lot of different things you could say, oh, this game has RPG elements. But I would say, like, typically it's like what we think of RPGs. What are the types of RPGs you guys like to play?
I love
go ahead, Tiffany.
RPGs. Well, I was just saying that I love RPGs. I love them. I love being a different person.
Which
in
ones
the
do you
fantasy world.
love?
So let me just get into it. Kingdom Hearts. I love me some Kingdom Hearts. I love Final Fantasy games. There's just so many that I love.
So you're like an all-rounder then. Like, it's not like a particular type of RPG, but just RPGs in general.
Yeah, when you say like if I say Fire Emblem Three Houses and Fire Emblem Awakening and stuff, that's like a tactical RPG, right?
Yeah, tactical or maybe strategy is a broader term, but I feel like tactics is that particular style. I
think that maybe action RPG is something that I'm not as well versed in. I guess for me personally, the most broad I could say is that I'm a giant fan of JRPGs, and honestly, I've yet to find a Western RPG that I like am enamored with. Like, is God of War an RPG, or is that action adventure? Oh,
I would say that's more of an action adventure with RPG mechanics. I wouldn't say that like its number one genre would be RPG personally, because I feel like its skill tree, my level whatever Kratos is going to look exactly the same as your level whatever Kratos.
So
in my mind,
what differentiates RPGs? Did I just like black out? Alex, did you explain what an RPG was?
No, because I think this is Matt's going into that element of it's hard to say what is an RPG particular now, because many games have RPG elements. Mm-hmm. So I think in the most broad sense, I would say anything with, I guess, some sort of leveling of any kind is an RPG technically.
Like Elden Ring?
Well, no, Elden Ring is definitely an RPG.
Yeah, it's definitely an RPG.
But I would say that we're not here to kind of mince words. If you think it's an RPG, I would say I agree with you. I'm not trying to RPG block anybody here.
And I feel like my definition is that if I play a game and you play it, they could be the same, but they honestly could be way different. Like Alex and I played Elden Ring. We played it way differently. We put skill points way differently, and my character had a cushy HP bar that like I could get hit twice and die. Alex, on the other hand, could like tank some hits because he put a ton of skill points in it. So like honestly, we worked really well together when we would fight in battles because like we just played it way differently.
Yeah, Matt over here hiding inside of the church and me standing outside getting targeted by the boss.
We all have our purposes. We all have our purposes. For me, though, I'll like say almost the exact opposite of Tiffany. I think historically, Western RPGs have been some of my favorite games of all time. I think that when I look at like my top 25, a lot of them are different genres outside of the RPG, but the only RPGs that manage to make it into my top 25 are Western. We've got, Witcher 3. We've got Oblivion, Skyrim. Some of these Bethesda RPGs that really made them more mainstream. Witcher 3 being what I think is probably the best RPG that's ever been made. And I would probably still stand by that. Like, the combat is whatever, and some people don't like it, and that's okay. But the RPG elements, the story, everything about it was just fantastic. I definitely think that Western RPGs definitely grabbed me in because I was more around those growing up. JRPGs are something that I used to play back when I, like, more or less when I was playing on, like, Game Game Boy. Like I felt like I had a lot more like JRPGs. Play like Chrono Trigger growing up. Like some of these more turn-based games I really enjoyed growing up, but now that I've gotten a little bit older, which I love Final Fantasy VII Remake, like that's fantastic. I love my tactical RPGs as well, but really Western RPGs is what it's all about. And so, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
And Tiffany mentioned she's not too big on maybe action RPGs, but I would say you are, because I would qualify, maybe it being a JRPG first, but I think would also qualify as an action RPG. Kingdom Hearts, it definitely is very active, it's action oriented, you have to click block, you have to click attack, you have to click dodge. And so I think, obviously it is a Japanese developed RPG, but there's a lot of action related elements where you're not selecting, well, you are selecting things from a menu, but the game isn't pausing, right? Like even as you're doing that, things are happening on the screen. Like you still need to be able to react to getting attacked while you're trying to cycle to your elixir, right? Even though we all know we don't use elixirs, right? Because it's that chipmunk hoarder mentality of, oh God, here's this precious item that I never want to use it because who knows how many I'll get.
As long as, if I'm in desperation mode, I'll use it. I guess you're right. Because, Final Fantasy VII Remake is an action, has action elements
right.
to a lot of.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I guess it just depends on story for me, and then vibe. Am I vibing? That's how I've been interacting with the world lately.
Yeah. Am I killing a god at the end of this game, or am I not?
Because that's a dead giveaway, right? For JRPGs.
Yeah.
But also Elden Ring, though, which I would say is a very Western RPG in my mind.
Japanese it's done by Japanese studio. Yeah, Japanese studio, isn't
but
it?
I still don't see that as being like a reason why something is a JRPG or not. You know what I mean? I feel like it's definitely the feel of it that gives it away, that it's more like Western. But it's weird because all these Dark Souls games, that's basically what it turns down to. It's either you're fighting off against a god or the dude that killed the last god. Like, it's one of the two in all the Souls games. So, Elden Ring, fantastic new RPG, a fantastic game. Just another kind of like little feather in the hat of Western RPGs in my mind.
Yeah, I think for me, I pretty much love all RPGs. I know we haven't quote unquote defined what an RPG is, but I feel like, action, turn-based, strategy, tactical, like every single type of RPG I think always is interesting because it's something that really makes you engage with the game, right? It's not a lot of just story or just gameplay, but typically RPGs have a good way to get invested on the story front and the gameplay front. Especially with JRPGs, as ridiculous as those stories may be, they're still fun to do, right? Like, who doesn't want to slay this fictional god in this world that's, either super oppressive against the world's characters or, maybe you're the weirdos and you're just trying to kill this god for just your own entertainment.
Boon.
But, yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think there's this kind of fun mix that JRPGs typically tend to do with how ridiculous their stories get. And how, I guess, maybe more serious Western stories are, something like The Witcher, right, has a very grounded, fantasy world, but a lot of it does make sense, right? You don't go to the raises of like, oh, how does magic exist in this world? You're going to go kill the thing that allows magic to exist, right? Like that doesn't happen in The Witcher. And another way, I'm not too far into it, but something that's really starting to grab me a little bit more, Horizon Forbidden West. There's a lot of deep story elements there that while the core gameplay is very fun, right? You're destroying / like dismantling these robot animals. There's a lot of kind of weird sci-fi elements going on with the story, right? About this being a post-apocalyptic world and, what happened to it, right? How did Horizon Zero Dawn come to be, but also, what's causing the events to happen in Horizon Forbidden West and how do you, how does Aloy address that? So I think there's a lot to say that RPGs tend to do a good job, getting you invested in both ways. I do want to point out one thing that, oh wait, Matt, you got a point?
Well, I was just going to build on that a little bit. I think that's, hearing you talk about kind of Western RPGs versus JRPGs, I think that's why I'm like more drawn to Western RPGs. I like the more believable story of, hey, here's
dinosaurs?
this issue. Not talking about that. I'm more or less talking about, like looking back at Oblivion. Oblivion was all about like this assassination attempt that happened at the very beginning, the prologue, and then following kind of this natural storyline of this character that has no name. It's you. It's trying to figure out where he lies in this like big conspiracy, or even with The Witcher, like The Witcher of like trying to protect someone like Ciri, which you guys know from The Witcher, series that's coming out. Trying to protect Ciri from this mystical force that is just like going through, and you're kind of like seeing the carnage that it lies in its wake and stuff. It's just always so like, I feel like I'm glued to the cutscenes. Well, for JRPGs, I'm like, if I skipped one cutscene, I don't know if I'll be less confused or more confused. You know what I mean? But yeah, I do like both. I don't want to just hate on JRPGs, but I do think that kind of like more realistic storyline of kind of like keeping everybody on the same, field. JRPGs, I feel like you're on the same field until someone like goes Super Saiyan, and then it's like I am God now. Like, it just always happens.
Or you just you thought you've killed God, but you really haven't, because you have to go through their 8 final forms to their like final form.
Exactly.
Ultima final form. I really do enjoy a lot of the different RPGs. I haven't even highlighted a turn-based RPG that I like, Final Fantasy X. Are you kidding me? Like, I love that. And Pokemon. Pokemon's an RPG, right? Mm-hmm. Is that an RPG?
Oh, of course it's an RPG.
Yeah, love me some Pokemon. So excited for Scarlet and Violet. But yeah, I love all sorts of RPGs, and I think I'm gonna say it. If God of War Ragnarok comes out this year, I think I'm getting it on release.
Nice. Excellent.
All my games are getting pushed back. Yeah. Thank you.
I felt like I should have filled in that void.
Yeah. All the games that I am excited about are being pushed back. For Spoken, another RPG is being pushed back later, and then Advanced Wars, a tactical RPG, is just being pushed back to who knows when because of the world climate right now, which is understandable. So I feel God of War Ragnarok, I need something to fill the void. And, Hogwarts Legacy RPG.
Can't wait.
Looking forward to figuring out more.
Cannot wait.
Spoiler alert, this is being recorded before the state of play.
Right, even though you'll probably be hearing this much later after the state of play. So
Yeah.
Way to date the podcast, Tiffany. Woo.
I'm falling in line with you fools.
There is something I do want to point out. Even though I enjoy most RPGs pretty equally, right? Like, there's not really something to say it's like, oh, I like tactical RPGs more than turn-based, or I like turn-based more than action. But I feel like I realize there is a little bit more distinction, at least for me, of when I prefer it to be turn-based or when I prefer it to be action-oriented. And it always feels like, at least for the action-oriented games, I'd rather it be kind of a solo party type of situation, so you don't have a party, right? And I think, despite it being an action RPG, we can just go back to the classic example, Kingdom Hearts, right? You have a party with you, even though it's an RPG. But how useful is your party when
Donald, please.
Yeah.
Donald, please heal me. Please.
Exactly. It's like, what's the point?
Donald's dead. He's not healing anybody.
Yeah, he's got the stars rotating around his head. He's knocked out in the corner, and you're like, what's the point of having a party in this action RPG if he's not going to help me? He's just sitting over there sleeping.
It's just to take aggro. We know it.
Exactly. It just like an Elden Ring, right? The only reason you're summoning people is so they take aggro for you.
What?
It's true.
Yeah. And on the flip side, right, turn-based RPGs, you have to have a party, right? Like, part of like turn-based, a lot that contributes to it, right, is the strategy. And I don't think there's a lot of strategy you can have with one person. So it definitely makes sense to have a party of people to, strategize your turns, try to figure out, okay, this turn, this character is going to, cast this debuff. The next turn, my other character is going to cast a buff on the third character. Then, bam, the third character lands that, like, empowered attack against a weakened enemy. Like, nothing feels better than having that kind of series of events line up. So I definitely think it makes sense, at least for me, that's how I prefer to have turn-based be more party focused and action games be more solo focused. And on top of that too, I feel like a lot of what makes action games better that way is that you don't have to worry about designing the game to accommodate more people. Because I know in something like Elden Ring or a lot of just action RPGs in general, and something I like to point to, even though maybe I would say it's an RPG, Monster Hunter, right? That typically if you have more than one person, especially in a co-op setting, like fighting with you in an action RPG, you have to make the enemies big. And it kind of becomes one note where you and up to 4 people are fighting these enemies, but they all have to be massive so that all 4 of you can hit it at the same time, right? Like it doesn't make sense to have really tiny enemies unless that's the particular challenge you want to make for the action RPG to say, oh, it's really hard to hit this thing, especially when there's 4 of you all competing to hit it, right? And that's something that I kind of realized, when playing Elden Ring was that a lot of the bosses or a lot of Souls bosses in general are massive, right? These are like very large creatures, they're this tiny guy, tiny tarnished, tiny, was it Lost Soul or Cindered Soul, whatever they call in the other Souls games. And typically you're fighting bigger things. And I think part of that too is to accommodate, right? You can co-op in those games, so it makes sense. It's easier to co-op the games when you have a large target to hit, like in Monster Hunter. But for me, what I really liked in Elden Ring in particular, because that's the only Souls game I really played, was actually fighting the quote unquote, NPC invader enemies that were like humans or tarnished, like that were your size. So it was like you're fighting another player. And I thought that was super interesting to have those kind of one-on-one moments where you're fighting these, like size enemies, because also in that case, they have similar movesets to you. They can use the Flask of Crimson Tears, they can heal. And I just think from that perspective, it's a lot more interesting, And so I do think it pigeonholes action RPGs into a certain design, especially for enemies that I don't particularly like. But I know maybe there's examples out there where they don't always do that. But those are just kind of what I've come across.
So there's another game that has that's a turn-based RPG that has huge enemies and little tiny people. Do you know what I'm talking about? Octopath Traveler. That was a turn-based RPG, and all those big old bosses were like freaking 18 feet tall compared to your little 1 centimeter party. I was like, what is going
Couple
on?
pixels.
Yeah.
We're mixing metrics here. 18 feet tall, 1 centimeter.
That's what it felt like. I was like, what is happening? My font is so small compared
that's
to
how
the
they
giant boss.
That's why they're so big. They messed up the conversion going from the imperial to metric system.
Yeah.
That's actually a really interesting point that you brought up, Alex. I never even thought about that. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because in Monster Hunter, you can interrupt your allies. So I think there's a lot that's like emphasized on saying it's big. So the people that have, slicing weapons hit the tail, right? Because you want to cut the tail off. And then the people that have blunt weapons hit the head because you want to stagger the monster. So I think in that case, Monster Hunter does it particularly well to say, they're big and meaningful because your team should be cooperating to like hit certain parts in a meaningful way. But in general, it just seems to be, little people, big enemy.
Mm-hmm. I feel like one aspect of RPGs that I find really refreshing is if by like the midway point, when I'm making decisions, which hopefully there are multiple like decisions to take you down different pathways, I'm not thinking about what I want to do, but I'm like, this character that I've been with for like 20 hours, like what would they do? Like what would Commander Shepard do for this? Would they like, I want to shoot this guy in the face, but like would Commander Shepard do that? And the answer is no. So then like you have to like be merciful or whatever. And I feel like that's a sign of a really good RPG because I'm always going to have like some sort of reaction to whatever people will do in video games. But if my character can kind of like change my path, it's like, wow, okay, we're actually doing something. Like the interactions, like the dialogue, the side quest, everything is pointing me towards like building this lore for this new character. And that's the cool part because someone else could play way different and shoot that guy in the face because not maybe because they want to, but because like, oh, well, my Commander Shepard, he's ruthless. Like he would not take lip, and he would shoot that guy in the face. And it's cool because they're both canon at that point.
So, what do we call Detroit Become Human? Is that a narrative action adventure?
Oh,
Like, what is that an RPG? Like, I mean,
I think it's narrative.
Okay, 'cause
Yeah,
I'm like,
right.
narrative
Because there's no
adventure.
like leveling, right? It's just mostly choice based. So I think there's a lot, even though you're influencing / kind of making those pivotal decisions, you're not necessarily kind of improving the character, right? Like there's no like, oh, you made this choice, therefore your like intelligence grew or something, right? I think those kind of stay along the lines of just telling a deeply engrossing narrative, but that's just mostly choice based.
Okay, so essentially, like a leveling system is one of the key components in your
All
mind.
right. I would say for me, if we all wanted to find like RPGs for ourselves, that it's a way to influence the growth of your character in some fashion. That if you have kind of a direct input to say, oh, whether it's not just leveling, but also stat allocation, right? To be like, particularly you want more strength or you want more intelligence, right? Like those could be stats you decide with something like the Souls franchise. Or right, leveling in general and equipment. In most RPGs, right, you're going to choose, I'm going to equip this halberd on this character versus I'm going to equip, a great sword, right, or something along those lines. So for me, that's kind of how I like to see it, of being able to influence the character's growth.
Interesting, because I feel like mine is most broad. Like my literal, opinion about RPGs is the title, role playing game. So if I'm playing a character, I consider that an RPG.
And I would agree with that. I'm not like disagreeing with that definition. It's just that I think I would have different expectations going into the game if you told me it was an RPG. Something like
Okay.
if you just described Detroit Become Human as an RPG to me and then I played it, I would probably disagree later to say, well, to me, that's not really an RPG, even though it is technically a role-playing game. Just the kind of the elements of the game that I would think would be there as what I would call an RPG don't exist, and therefore I would maybe be disappointed. But that doesn't mean it's necessarily, a bad game or not. That's just these very broad, generalized classifications we like to give games.
Okay, so then Matt, what is your personal definition of an RPG?
I think it's similar to what you guys are talking about. I think it's a way to make your character different than someone else with what they are giving you. Like they're giving you kind of the tools to make your character yours, and that you have the freedom of doing something different than someone else. Like to me, that's an RPG. Like anything from stats to like what equipment that you're making versus like decisions that you're making, or even like for some of the tactical thing, which is more likely, is like what relationships are you choosing to pursue? Like for if you are becoming really good friends with people on your squad and you're like taking them around, and then maybe you unlock certain quests that that would have been completely locked to everyone else. Like that to me is an RPG mechanic. And so for me, it's kind of giving them their decide your own fate, R.L. Stein book, and then having anyone do whatever they want and having that. So not cookie cutter action adventure.
Okay. And honestly, Matt, hearing some of the way you described your RPG, like, man, I'm like getting even more excited for Fire Emblem, the next Fire Emblem game.
Yeah.
Like I am like chomping at the bit. Alex, come on, promise me you'll check out the next entry of Fire Emblem.
No.
It was both of our game of years
You didn't even
before the pod.
You didn't even say it depends. You flat out said no. Yeah, Matt's right. It was my game. Honestly,
it was both of ours.
I'm
was
so
it 2019?
Yes, it came out in 2019. I just need to go back and do another run through, man. That's what
I'll say it depends if it's got a fun name like Triangle Strategy. If it's like
God.
Fire Emblem Quadrangle Eclipse or something, that'd be sweet.
Quadrangle.
Man, could you? Oh my God, what if they went into like space? Like enough of this
That would be crazy.
Like fantasy element.
Oh, then it wouldn't be Fire Emblem anymore. I would hope they call it something else because I feel like people would be very disappointed.
Actually, no.
Yeah.
There's the space-time dimensions that's been brought up in multiple Fire Emblems. So, like, I mean, there's a possibility there. Just saying, space-time continuum. That's how you recruit the children's in the earlier games.
Oh.
Matt, when in Fire Emblem Awakening and in Fire Emblem Fates, literally when you paired up some of the characters, they would make children. And they would come through the space-time continuum, and then you can recruit the children to your war. And the children's hair color would be based off, it was either the mom or the dad. So, like,
interesting.
every child had, like, 30 different versions based on the color, because the color combinations of the hair. Such a great game. 3DS.
That sounds like something you loved.
Everyone,
recruiting
PSA,
children for the war effort.
PSA,
Yeah.
eShop on the 3DS, DS systems are about to like shut down soon. Get yourself some Fire Emblem Awakening and Fire Emblem Fates, all 3 versions. Just get them. Just get them.
And on the topic of the mechanics of a game, Tiffany brought up the whole relationship pairing in Fire Emblem and the ability to enlist, if you will, these offspring into the war effort. What are some and we don't have to get that specific as in that's what Fire Emblem does with their kind of relationship system. But in general, like, are there specific mechanics you guys really enjoy in RPGs? Like some things that just make an RPG very fun to play?
Yeah, cooking.
Like, to what extent? Are we just talking about like Final Fantasy 15 cooking, or like how far are we talking about cooking?
That's a great point. So I feel like Fire Emblem. Oh my god, I still am just talking about Fire Emblem. I'm sorry, I meant Final Fantasy 15. Final Fantasy 15 and Breath of the Wild, I think, have equivalent cooking situations. Like, you just throw like you pick the ingredients and you press a button, and then it's made, and then it like gives you a stat boost. That's fine. Like, I think that's fine. Now, Kingdom Hearts 3 with Remy and the little mini game cooking, that's like a rhythm game. Like, give me that. Like, I love that.
Zoom zoom.
Oh, I love it. I just love it. And then, oddly enough, fishing. I
knew it.
I love virtual fishing. I'm just not into real life fishing.
Have you ever fished in real life?
No.
Okay. Well, never mind.
Matt, I just don't know that there's to a point I'm okay with silence to a point, but then I'm like,
Yeah.
I need to do something else. But yeah, Alex, I think when games have unique things where side activities give you stat boosts, I very much like those. Like, I think it makes it meaningful. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not just cooking for cooking's sake. It like in Spirit Fair, even though that's not an RPG. Or I guess, no, that's not really an RPG. But, there's a cooking mechanic in there, but it didn't really do anything. It was just like, the spirits were like, we're hungry, feed us. And it's like, okay, here you go. But it didn't increase stat boosts or anything. I mean, it did improve relationships with other people. But at the same time, it was like a necessity. Because, people, in real life, people need to eat to survive. So in the game, we had to keep our spirits satiated.
So you're saying even in spirit form, you still need to eat?
Yes.
Okay.
That's accurate.
I love when they have kind of almost unique stats, like from the very beginning. Like, we get it a little bit with Elden Ring, but honestly, say what you will about Bethesda, but Bethesda Fallout, like the Fallout series, with their like special stats that they do, like special stands for like strength, perception, endurance, charisma, intelligence, agility maybe, and luck. Like, based on those things, those will shape what you do. So like, there's a whole subreddit and a full like people that think the canon way to go through Fallout is to have an intelligence of 1. It means you cannot have an educated thing. You cannot trick people. You cannot do anything. You are a dumb person the entire game. And, like, it unlocks new dialogue choices. So, like, in a normal situation, you could, like, fake your way into saying, like, oh, I could fix that computer. If you're a dumb person, you'll go up to it. You'll be like, me, scientist, I fix things. And the people will, like, shrug you off. But, like, in Fallout 3, there was this one character that would not talk to anybody. I remember this coming through, like, I feel like it was on Reddit or something. It gets mentioned every now and again. But that character will unlock dialogue issue for people that have an intelligence of 1 because he's a dumb character. and he like feels like he doesn't want to talk to anybody with a higher intelligence than him. But if you're a dumb character, you can have like a deep conversation. It's just like you have to be so specific in even like the special stats, which you get like so many, you get like 20 points, and you have to, you know, fill them out, and that kind of puts you into where you need to be. And just that type of thing, like that's replayability right there. Like I really enjoy having high charisma and high intelligence because I love talking my way through everything. And
Just like in real life.
just in, like in real life. But
That's role playing as himself.
yeah. I feel most comfortable here. But when I started seeing that, it was like, I feel like I need to have a dumb run. Like, I feel like I'm missing part of the game because I haven't played it that way. And that to me is like the secret sauce, that special sauce of replayability that I really don't think happens with RPGs. Like Tiffany has talked about a game of the year that she hasn't even gone back to play again because it's a commitment. Like these are usually, you know, tens to
true.
hundreds of hours. So
That's
like
true.
replayability, that's the secret sauce right there.
I think for me, and not to like divert from the replayability, because you know I don't necessarily replay a lot of games. Like obviously, as Matt pointed out, it's like RPGs in particular, very long commitments. So there's kind of like if you want to go through a lot of them, you kind of have to live with your choices in a way. At least that's how I play. To say, got through this once, this is what I decided to do. I got to move on. You know, like in Elden Ring, as Matt pointed out before, to get through that game, I just put a lot of stats into strength and vigor, and I was just kind of face tanking through bosses. So there wasn't a lot of like, even if I got hit, you know, the way I built my character was a little bit more forgiving. So in that case, right, I was able to take more hits to survive and have the chance to, you know, heal back up to continue taking more hits, right? So it's just kind of like two meat sacks, right? The boss's HP and my HP just clashing heads. But a mechanic I really like, and I think this more so applies to open world RPGs because, you know, as it seems a lot of RPGs these days are being designed as open world, is just being able to fast travel from wherever, right? From wherever point to whatever point. And I think this was always like a limitation in other games where it's like you had to go to a specific spot, talk to a specific person, or interact with a specific like item, and then from that point you could then go to another specific place. But I feel like games, and maybe this is just also due to the fact that technology is getting better, but now you can just open up the map, choose a spot to fast travel to, and then go there. And I think that has just expedited the way like to play a game, especially an open world RPG, in that you don't have to worry about, you know, if you go off on this weird direction, right? And you're like, oh, this isn't the main story, but I want to go down here and see what's down here. You're not necessarily punishing yourself to say, oh, now I have to run all the way back to where I was and take the other path. I can just like go back to that fork and then go in the other direction, you know? And I think that's really made especially open world RPGs more interesting to play, to say, you know, we want you to go where you want. Like there is a main story to follow, but at least you can play the open world how you wish, right? Something I've took to with Horizon Forbidden West, which I'm currently playing, is that, you know, I'm really letting kind of the main story be the markers to say, I'm only going to go here if the main story takes me here. But once I'm there, that's when I'm going to decide, hey, this area looks cool, you know, and then be able to branch out and kind of go to the other places nearby, right? Rather than being overwhelmed with the hundreds of icons on the map and saying, oh God, I can't get through this just because there's so much to do. But rather kind of let the game, you know, find those fast travel points and then be not afraid to like go out into this random corner, maybe find something, maybe not, but then just being able to hop back, you know, has really made things just a little bit easier to digest in a way. And I guess, you know, another mechanic I would like to shout out, and maybe it's not a mechanic, but just the way that game developers seem to be developing games, is just the willingness to change genres. And in a way, and by that I mean kind of take an RPG and transform it into a different one. So I want to shout out, you know, Yakuza, right? Yakuza 1 through 6 have been traditionally kind of brawlers. You press square for your light attack. You press triangle for your what they call heat actions, which are basically your special attacks. And it's just a game where like it's an action RPG. But then with Yakuza 7, with Yakuza Like a Dragon, they took the risk to just change it into a turn-based RPG. Completely different. And being the fact that I love all RPGs of any type, I really appreciated that. Not to say I got tired of 1 through 6, but I like the different direction and the way they were able to kind of change the experience to say, this is still Yakuza. It's still that type of story you might like, right? The kind of Japanese crime thriller drama. But now you have a party of 4 people and you get classes, right? Like you can be a school like cafeteria lady, or you could be like a pop star class. They're like the classes get so wacky in that it's something that you never could have done.
Cafeteria lady?
Not really. You can't be a cafeteria.
Oh.
You can be a pop star though. You can be a pop star. That is a class. But yeah, you can just get crazy with it. And on the flip side of that, right, how Persona 5 was a classic turn-based RPG, and with its sequel, Persona 5 Strikers, it just became an action RPG, and which was also great. So it seems like developers out there are willing to take these established franchises and turn them into other genres of RPG that are still just as fun. And, if you have a good story, if you have kind of a good world, that goes to show, you can make different types of RPGs. And with good developers like Atlas, like RGG Studio, there'll still be fun games to play. And definitely I can appreciate the willingness to take those risks.
Mm-hmm. We see it in Final Fantasy too, like them kind of, historically being more of a, I guess, turn-based RPG. And then now it's very much an action RPG. I almost wonder, I think Yakuza Like a Dragon is almost like an outlier, because I feel like, and maybe this is just me reading into it, maybe action RPGs are an easier entry point for people. At least for me, I feel like action RPGs are easily to digest. So like going into Final Fantasy 15, it would feel like probably a little bit harder if it was still kind of like that more tactical, turn-based RPG versus an action RPG. So, but like Yakuza Like a Dragon, I that's its own little misnomer. But yeah, no, I think that's cool. I think that's a good point. And I don't know many other genres outside of that RPG role where RPGs have such a depth, that there's such a variety of RPGs, that I don't really see that with anything else, like any other genre. And I'm just like kind of going through them in my mind. I just don't see that.
All right. And with that, I think that brings us to the end of this episode 64 of the RXP podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment down below of what your thoughts are about RPGs. Like and subscribe if you so wish. And if you're listening to this on podcast services, rate us there. I think Apple and Spotify have rating capabilities now, so go ahead and do that. And in case you didn't know and you're on one platform or the other, we are on YouTube and podcast services. So maybe if you want to flip over from the opposite thing that you're using right now, go ahead. That option's available. You can write in to rxp.podcast@gmail.com or at rxp_podcast to let us know your thoughts if you're not watching the YouTube version. Shout out to Grandmaster Doug for our music. And until next time, take care. Yeah, recruiting children for the war effort.
We all have our purposes.